The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery, but the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Nice to have Ric Seiling back to talk a little hockey. Earlier in the season, I'll be talking hockey, but it's a hot topic these days.
It definitely is. As they sit on top of the throne right now for the time being, we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, we've got some things to say about that. Pat Duffy,
Yep.
wearing a Sabres jersey.
Well, continuing the 50th anniversary theme we got going. It's 70s week this week. Rick caught the tail end of that, and I've been looking for one that had a 16 on it, but they all say LaFontaine on the back, so I don't know what to do.
And it's been 3 different weeks and 3 different unis.
I believe it's been 4, and yeah, you know how I do things, man. I got unis for days. Let's keep this thing rolling.
Alrighty, Rick, the Sabres. How seriously this early in the season do we take what's happening in Buffalo?
Well, it's interesting because doing the Amerks games, I was having a conversation with my counterpart, Don Stevens, and he reminded me that last year, he said in the first 24 games, he asked, do you know what their record was? And not a clue. He said 17-6-1 the first 24 games last season. I went, so, it kind of deflates that a little bit, but the thing is, it's a good place to start and keep working forward towards, and hopefully they can keep it going.
But I think anybody that watches hockey last year, because that counts the 10-game winning streak going up to Thanksgiving with that 17-6-1 last season, right? It was the way they were winning games last year versus the way they're winning games now, where you're winning games throughout 2/3 of the game, right? Where most of those games they were winning last year, they're going into overtime, they're catching backup goalies, you're getting the right bounces. The Sabres this season are winning without catching bounces, which is something that I have not been used to over the last 10 years. On top of that, what tells me this might be different is you're winning games without needing contributions from guys that you didn't expect. Like the last couple of years, you hoped Tage Thompson was going to be something, and if you got your goal, that was great. Evan Rodriguez was a legitimate player on this roster. Well, Tage is down in Rochester playing great. Evan Rodriguez has been a healthy scratch for the majority of the season. You got guys like Johansson that are showing up and contributing. It looks like a real hockey team, right?
Is this the kind of thing that, like the nature of hockey, that a team can go from where Buffalo was the last however many years and just like all of a sudden with largely the same number of players become good?
Well, I think there's another part to this too, and I think it's the development of some players. I mean, if you look at Olofsson, he got 6-7 goals this year as a rookie. Here's a guy here that spent some time in Rochester, spent time with Chris Taylor. I think Chris Taylor's been doing an excellent job here in Rochester, and I think it's starting to pay off for the Rochester organization. For years, the cupboard was bare. There was no hopefuls, no draft picks, high hopes that they're riding in Rochester. This place was just decimated of prospects. And I think you're starting to see that now, guys coming down. Some of these guys, like you said, with Rodriguez, now, all spent some time in Rochester. They all started learning from Taylor, and they all started moving up the ladder. Some got moved up sooner than they should have. And I think they've kind of petered out a little bit. They didn't get the full learning experience. And also and the problem you have when you draft 18-year-olds, some of your 18-year-olds are the best they're ever going to be at 18.
Yes,
they don't go any further. That's why you see so many undrafted players that step into the lineup. And I always go back to the same one. I marked this kid as soon as he stepped on the ice in Rochester. He was with Florida at the time, Jason Garrison. I said, this kid is going to the NHL. He had all the tools, and he's had a great NHL career. But there are other guys I've seen out there that I'm going, really? They drafted him? And you talk to the scouts, because I get a chance to talk to him in the press box, and they say, he was the best available at that time. And he just didn't go anywhere after that.
So 2 coaches. Ralph Kruger, how much is he influencing this whole picture? And what are they doing with Chris Taylor? I don't kind of get that.
Well, Granato's out right now. We don't know what he's had a serious illness. And they, instead of hiring someone, they just brought Chris Taylor up to fill his spot. I don't think we're going to see Tails back with this trip going on the way they're riding the rail right now. I don't think we'll see
Maybe
him
he'll make a
back.
change.
And Gordon Dineen's been an AHL coach before. He's been around. He knows the game, and his team's not doing bad either. And he's been under Taylor for a while now, so he understands what's going on as well. But the big thing when you're an AHL coach is you have to adapt to the NHL coach's system. So you're always changing. If the NHL coach wants to play a different system and you're used to playing this way, you've got to adapt because you've got to train those players so when they move up, that they automatically fill right in and know what's going on.
So the last thing, I mean, do you find yourself like perched on the edge saying, "Oh, I'm just waiting for this to fall apart," or do you see hope?
I do see hope, and here's the difference. Last season when that 10-game win streak finished up, and even in between it, right? Like every loss, every setback was devastating. Whereas I'm finding myself now in games where they're not playing up to their potential or games that they're losing, there are things that I like. There are things that give me hope moving forward. I don't think the world is ending when Carter Hutton gives up 6 goals in a night or when you end up blowing a 2-goal lead to Arizona, because there are other things that I'm seeing. And, I mean, we're going to find out. The schedule gets really, really tough coming up starting this week. After the next 5 games, we'll see, is this team a legitimate contender?
Yeah, they go into it. Heck, there's only one team in the NHL that's got more points. Last thing.
But there's a good point here to be brought, and I was at the game the other night against Arizona, and I was talking with a couple of my alumni. And the one point they brought up was how they rebounded after the bad loss on the West Coast to come back and win the next 2, including a shutout in there. Mm-hmm. That they didn't sit and lull over it. They bounced back, and we all agreed that's a great sign.
We are the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House, and we talk Buffalo Bills next. The Press Box is brought to you in part by Bay & Goodman Pizza, a local Rochester favorite. Corner of North Winton and Browncroft, Bay & Goodman Pizza. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us. We are the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House. So the Philadelphia game is the moment everyone's been saying, aha, it's been the schedule all along.
You sound like you have extra joy in your voice.
I don't.
I've been on a heater, and you've been pumping your Patriots, and all of a sudden, I'm not looking so good. I feel personally attacked, but that's fine.
But that is one way to look at it.
No, listen, there was some exposure there. I was shocked that the defense performed so poorly against the run, but there are some caveats here. One, you had a desperate team that needed to win badly in Philadelphia. If they lose that game, they might be out of the NFC East race, and that NFC East is a nightmare division. It's terrible. There's no good. On top of that, you have a really good coach in Doug Peterson who knows what he's doing. And finally, Matt Milano, who we talked about last week, the linebacker coming back from injury, you needed him to have a big game. And it became apparent early that maybe he wasn't the player that he was healthy. Like, he's still dealing with that hamstring injury. It's concerning. It's not overly concerning. You get a chance to correct yourself against Washington this week. Give me 3 more games, then I'll make my decision.
It's like, and it's in all sports. It's like, when you're playing these teams and the schedule. I mean, how much do you dive into that, or you just kind of let it ride?
Well, at the end of the year, they don't ask how, they ask how many. We obviously know that, and that's going to get you in or out of the playoffs. But you said it was a must-win for Philly. I think it was a must-win for Buffalo to prove that they were bona fide.
But
I think that's what the fans' contention is. This was a must-win to prove that we're a bona fide team, and I think the defense let them down.
No, but on the grand scheme of things, I don't disagree with the defense let them down. But in the grand scheme of things, let's say you went out and beat Philly. Let's say they went out and beat Philly. You beat a 3-5 team. They wouldn't have gotten him any national respect. They were in a no-win situation. You win that game, you beat a team that's under 500. You haven't beat a team that's over 500 all season.
Which was on a neutral field, though, favored to win.
Yes, exactly. I mean, listen, Philadelphia has an unbelievable amount of talent. We were talking all week about, you got the practice squad players in their defense. Their quarterback, before that game, Carson Wentz, who's being blamed for this terrible season, had thrown 13 touchdown passes versus 4 interceptions. Their leading wide receiver was a tight end despite that statistic. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Oh, and you still have a second-round pick who was a star behind Saquon Barkley at Penn State who breaks off a 65-yard run. I'm not as concerned as everybody else is right now.
So now we get a chance to, make it better against another team that's really struggling. What do you need to see this week when the Bills play the Redskins?
Why do you see, again, you're talking about injuries. They went through the whole list of questionables beforehand, and you knew, and Milano was one of them. Mm-hmm. And you could tell that these injuries were hurting, and they've got to get their guys healthy, and they've got to tighten that defense back up, because they're talking about all week long, great defense, and I just think that everybody's going to learn from that. And everybody's going to just start running the ball against them and keep them on the field.
Yeah, I mean, you do, this week is your opportunity to try what you're going to try to make it better, right? Because you have some wiggle room here, right? Things can go bad and you have an opportunity to beat the Redskins anyway. But yeah, just be consistent this week. Give me 4 quarters. I don't need Josh Allen to throw for 400 yards. I don't need the defense to pitch a shutout. Play a consistently good 4-quarter game for the first time this season. I'm okay.
How concerned are you that Allen is still turning the ball over on a fairly regular basis?
Okay, I mean, yes, hold on to the ball for God's sakes, but you can't compare him to what you want him to be. You compare him to what he was when he first showed up in the league, and you cannot say that he hasn't been growing, right? I mean, the knock on him the whole time was it's going to take him a little while to be an NFL quarterback. I don't know if he's that franchise quarterback, but I have seen growth, and it's in the right direction, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, you've coached, and I know not football so much, but
Never.
To the fan. Well,
So
to the
much,
fan,
so much.
Well, that's so much qualifies. So a fan watches this happen and says, why doesn't he just stop doing that? It's not that simple, is it?
I came to a realization watching the game the other day, and I like you, I have seen growth in him. I've seen things that I think this guy could be a franchise quarterback, and then I was snapped back to reality. He's 23 years old.
Yeah.
You know, he's just a young guy.
Oh, well, this ain't
He's
junior.
got to learn.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought you were going to tell me 23 years
he's
old.
only
Okay.
23.
Well, 23 years old is older now than it used to be, though. I mean, they're expecting a lot more out of 23-year-olds than
Yes,
they did 10
they are.
years ago.
Yes, they are, and I agree with 100%. But he has a lot. If you're going to take him and you're going to compare him to an Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees, you know, let's look at the age difference here and the experience they had, and look also who they may have sat behind before when they did that. You know, Aaron Rodgers sitting behind Favre for how many years before he stepped out onto and took his first main snap as a regular. You know, he didn't have that luxury of doing that. The best thing that ever happened to me being drafted to Buffalo was Freddie Stanfield. Sitting on the bench beside Freddie Stanfield. Hey, kid, see this, see that, watch this, do that. I was 19 years old, and by the time we hit playoff time, I was tired, and I didn't play as a regular. I was still in the fourth line at the time. But the experience that Freddie Stanfield and Ronnie Schock and these guys brought to me lived on, and that's what I try to pass on to others. But again, he didn't have that. Get in there, kid, and do it.
Thanks, Nate Peterman.
Love Freddie Stanfield. We're the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House. Like it or not, it's next. Here's the Press Box trivia question, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Here's the Press Box trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. We are the Rochester Press Box and presented by the Genesee Brew House. Rick, the World Series, 6 road wins in a row, never happened before. How tough is it to win on the road, and why is that such an accomplishment?
Nowadays, most coaches would like to open up their playoffs on the road because there's less pressure on them. There's a lot of pressure at home to perform, especially when it's in a do-or-die situation. I think opening up on the road is a great way to start. I would prefer to do that. And I just think that the World Series is proving it. There's not as much pressure on that home team, and they just come in and they do their job and get out. But the home team's got you've got family, you've got all the fans, you've got everybody recognizing you. You've got wherever you go in town, that while you're in the playoffs, you're recognized and you've got people on you all the time.
To your point, they do seem to be a lot tighter at home, both teams.
Yeah. I really think the pressure is on there and when you're the home team and to perform. And I sometimes wonder if home team advantage is really an advantage anymore.
Pat, like it or not, analytics. The Yankees just fired their pitching coach, Larry Rothschild, essentially because they didn't think he's an older guy, he's not up to date with the stuff. That's kind of taken over, isn't it?
I find it funny that they couldn't go get the arms they wanted, so it's the guy who likes the analytics, or they want the analytics. No, but I find it weird that these baseball teams, they seem to be going all or nothing. Either you're a team that subscribes to analytics or you're a team that doesn't at all. I see the value of the numbers, and you're starting to see it in the NHL as well. But teams that fully commit to these things are never teams that are successful on a long-term basis, in my humble opinion. Find a way to mix it in, but don't blow a guy out because it's not something he's going to be hanging his hat on all the time. And you see this all the time, Bill. Like, you have these ideas, Moneyball, for example, right? It's a brilliant idea, and all these teams are going to go try it. Well, after it doesn't work for a couple of years, we're going to take all that, throw it completely out, all of the hundreds of millions of dollars we spent, players we invested in, managers we brought in because they know it, and we're going to do something completely new. I get the feeling analytics might be one of those things.
Yeah, Houston plays both ends against the middle, I think, because they're very analytically based, but they've got a manager who's, while he is analytics, but he knows how to work with people, and as he brings an old school approach to it, and it works for them, obviously. We are the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House, and Unfinished Business is next. And now here's this week's MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
And now to Eichel. He floated one.
This cinnamon sugar pumpkin latte looks amazing.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I wish I were this creative.
Oh, I'm not that creative.
Oh, wow. Did you just carve this?
I did, yeah.
Try our new signature latte. It's all things pumpkin at Dunkin'.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House, Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin'. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
So breaking news, the NCAA is going to allow college athletes to make money off their names and likeness because they feel it's finally time. Not really, no, because California made them do it. But here's what's interesting, right? There are a lot of people on social media that are furious that these kids are going to make money because they're athletes playing college sports, which is not actually what's happening. They're given permission to make money off their faces and names. There's going to be no money coming from the NCAA that isn't collectively bargained from, like video game things like that. Essentially, what these kids will be able to do is put their faces on billboards and go to autograph shows, maybe sell a jersey or two. What I find interesting for the people that are complaining, why don't you look at other scholarships in college and how they work? For example, if my son, if I had a hypothetical son, goes and plays college football at Ohio State, he can't make a dime if someone wants to buy his autograph or pay him to go do something somewhere else involving football. Yet, if that same kid got a scholarship to Ohio State University to dot the I as the trombone player in the marching band, I don't know if they hang, I'm just throwing it out there, that kid can go sign a record contract, and that kid can go appear on television if he got famous for some reason by playing the trombone. And he doesn't lose his scholarship. It's not about whether or not the kid should be paid or not paid to play sports. It's about keeping it consistent. How can you tell one kid who got a scholarship because of a talent that they can continue to make money outside of the school based on that talent? Well, you tell another one, well, we make too much money in March Madness and the tournament playing football for you to be able to take any of that. Finally, something gets fixed.
Well, I've got a little different scoop on the NHL point system. A few years ago, they decided they're going to include overtime, give teams the overtime win, the extra point, and both teams walk away with another point. But I really think that has messed up the point standing and the ability of certain teams making the playoffs. I'm going to look at the Buffalo Sabres, 78-79, 36 wins, 88 points, made the playoffs. But in 11-12, 39 wins, 89 points, didn't make the playoffs. 15-16, 35 wins, 81 points, no playoffs. 18-19, 33 wins, 76 points, no playoffs. I really think that extra point has stopped the Sabres from making the playoffs, and I think it affects several other teams as well. I'd like to see them go back to the 2 points. You can play the overtime, but one team walks away with 2 points and one team walks away with 0.
So it's a story worth retelling, I think. It was 2 years ago, late in the NFL season, the Cincinnati Bengals were playing the Baltimore Ravens. Cincinnati is behind 27-24. They have the ball at midfield. It's a 4th down and 12. Andy Dalton goes back and passes to Tyler Boyd, who breaks a couple of tackles and goes in for a miracle touchdown at the end of the game. The game does Cincinnati no good. But down in Miami, where the Buffalo Bills had just got done beating the Miami Dolphins, they're going crazy because that loss by Baltimore to Andy Dalton and Cincinnati put the Bills in the playoffs for the first time in 17 years. 17 years. It was a monumental moment for the Buffalo Bills. Meanwhile, Andy Dalton becomes a Western New York hero. Buffalo Bills fans donate $410,000 to his foundation and cheer him every chance that they get. This is apropos to bring up this week because Andy Dalton just lost his starting job to some guy named Ryan Finley, and we wish him luck, certainly. But for 8.5 years as the starter for the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm not sure that Andy Dalton did anything that'll be remembered more than what he did that day by us. Unfinished Business is brought to you by Duncan. America runs on Duncan. Nice to have you back, Rick. Good hockey insight. You know what kills me is I still think that they still treat like 9 wins, 9 losses, and 3 overtime losses as a 500 hockey team.
That's my
It
point.
isn't.
That is my point.
It's 9-12 for Pete's sake. Pat, great as always.
Oh, yeah, obviously. You forgot to mention, by the way, the worst part of the whole Andy Dalton thing, they benched him on his birthday.
Oh, yes.
He found out on his birthday that his career is essentially, happy birthday, Andy Dalton. Thanks for all the good you did.
I think he'll still play again.
Ooh.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week for the Rochester Press Box.